Good morning, everyone. My name is Yulia Chekuneava, and I'm director of the Clean Growth Leadership Network. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Professor James Marker, Professor of Systems Modeling at WMG at the University of Warwick, to discuss a recently published piece, Lithium-ion battery cathode and anode potential observer based on reduced order electrochemical single particle model. This piece is a collaboration between WMG, the Faraday Institution, and the School of Metallurgy and Materials at the Birmingham University. Good morning, Professor Marker. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning.
Morning. The first question, I think, is a bit of a setting the scene. It would be interesting to understand the overview of the paper and why you thought it's right time for this research.
The paper is really to do with the subject of fast charging within electric vehicles. So one of the main requirements, one of the main attributes that potential consumers of electric vehicles want to see is the ability to charge them quickly. We know that charging the battery quickly can lead to degradation, so can accelerate the aging that you experience within the battery pack. And this modeling that we undertook was about being able to quantify what that degradation might be, and ultimately to try and modify how vehicle batteries are charged so you can limit that degradation in the future.
Okay, well, there are a few important terms I think you used in this introduction. So let's maybe start decoding a few of them. Let's start from the basics. What are the different types of EV battery chargers that are currently in use in the UK?
So there's a whole range of ways in which consumers can charge their electric vehicles. You can charge at home through simply a very slow link, where you simply link into a conventional sort of socket in your house. You can then sort of charge at sort of higher power ratings, so up to 7 kilowatts, up to 12 kilowatts, and then you start getting into sort of fast charging and rapid charging when you are getting into 25 kilowatts plus up to 50 kilowatts of power. And those are the sorts of chargers that you see on the roadside now in certain establishments, in certain car parks.
And so how different it is from the consumer experience standpoint, the fast charging or rapid charging?
It's time. So it's really time. I think ultimately what people are trying to get to is the ability to charge the battery within about sort of 20 minutes. So that's what's called a C3 charge. That's when you are that's when you can charge the complete energy capacity of the battery in about sort of 15 to 20 minutes. When you are charging at home, when you are charging at lower power ratings, then you're typically talking about an overnight charge. So charging in many hours, and that comes down to the amount of power that the sort of charging unit can provide to the battery.
And so from the standpoint of the available battery technology and from the standpoint of the life of the battery itself, is there any any difference if we are using fast charging or the normal charging, as you said, overnight with the normal socket? Is there any damage to the battery?
So fast charge. So when you charge the battery quickly, you then you generally have an increase in heat generation within the battery, because simply I squared R in terms of heat generation as a function of current. And that heat rise, if it is not properly managed, will cause some degradation in the battery system. Really, it depends how long you fast charge for, over the state of charge range of the battery. So if you imagine the battery as an empty container, as you charge the battery, you are filling it up. So the state of charge is increasing. When you get to the higher states of charge region, that is typically when you will experience the most degradation. And the main mechanism of degradation is something called lithium plating. And that's what we were trying to model and observe within the paper that we published.
And, you know, from a consumer standpoint, and I think from the general public knowledge, I think many people were aware of, you know, their smartphones, for example, overheating when they were flying recently. And certain smartphones, I think, were even, you know, forbidden by the airlines just because of the heat they were releasing and the danger that it was causing to the potential risks of, you know, accidents, etc. So you're mentioning that there is a lot of heating going on with the fast charging and rapid charging. Is it safe? Yeah.
So we're not talking about a safety concern directly from fast charging. If lithium plating as a mode of degradation, if that was to continue unchecked over a long period of time, then there is the possibility for dendrites to form within the battery, and then in theory you could have an internal short circuit which would lead to a battery failure. But those are things that happen over a long period of time, and there's a lot of safety mechanisms within the battery pack. There's a lot of control, a lot of sort of software mechanisms that are there to protect that from happening in the battery. The process of fast charging a battery under a conventional consumer unit that people can use now at motorway service stations and that sort of thing, those are completely safe.
And so what are the maybe couple of mitigants that are currently used within the technology, the controls that that you were mentioning, and essentially maybe some mitigants to protect the battery against the lithium degradation and the damage to the battery itself?
So currently what the battery pack would have is it will measure current flowing into the battery, it will measure temperature, and it won't just measure one temperature. In a large battery pack that you can imagine for a vehicle that could be the size of the floor plan of the vehicle, there'll be many temperature sensors scattered around the battery. So you understand not just what the overall temperature is, but actually localized hotspots that might appear in certain areas of the battery. You also have a measure of the state of charge, so how much energy there is in the battery. So all of those things combined with the intelligence of the charger help to protect the battery from aging, and they help to protect it from a safety point of view as well.
Understood. And then from the standpoint of the life of the battery, the fast charging, is it eating up to the life of the battery, or it's the same pretty much if we're using a conventional charging?
No, you can see accelerated degradation. So you need to differentiate between safety and aging. They're very different things, and I wouldn't try to conflate the two at all. So in aging, so generally modeling, experimental work, real life work in applications, the data is quite consistent that certain modes of operation will cause the battery to degrade faster. And one of those modes of operation is low temperature, high current. When you combine those two together, you will generally see a higher rate of aging within the battery system. So for example, somebody fast charging in a country part of the world where the ambient temperature is very low, in principle, they would see more degradation in their battery than a consumer charging a battery, same current value, but at a much higher ambient temperature because of where they're living in the world.
Also, there were a couple of A couple of terms that I find I wanted to learn more about in the recent paper that you published. Maybe we can touch on those. If you can, in a very simple term, explain what is meant by vehicle to grid or vehicle to X as a charging option, and how those may may be used to mitigate battery damage, or support the local energy grid.
Yeah, so all of the charging that I was just talking about, so conventional charging, rapid charging, fast charging, those are simply ways in which you can move energy into the battery system. So they are one direction, unidirectional methods of charging, and that's when you're taking energy from the grid, from the energy supply, and charging up the battery in the vehicle. Vehicle to grid or vehicle to X is a way in which that energy transfer can be bidirectional. So there's a lot of interest both from energy operators, from local governments, as to how we can utilize all of this potential stored energy that's going to exist in vehicle battery packs when those vehicles are not being driven. So vehicle to X, vehicle to charge, vehicle to grid capability is really the control systems, the power electronics, the charging infrastructure that needs to be in place, such that when your vehicle is parked at home, or when your commercial vehicle is parked in the parking lot and it's connected to a charger, then you can utilize the energy that's in that battery during periods when you don't need it for driving to either go back into the grid, or more likely to support behind the meter services. So behind the meter services is not where you're not discharging that energy back to the grid, but you are using the energy in the battery to offset the need to take energy from the grid. So you see quite a lot of people talking about vehicle to building or vehicle to home as options, as architectural options of how you could use the vehicle battery within a more sort of integrated energy environment.
Understood. And those are the potentially those are the elements that are potentially helpful to mitigate the battery damage, just because of the way it releases the energy.
Potentially. So there's a bit of discussion and a bit of debate about this, and different research articles have come to different conclusions, and different academics, as we all are, have different opinions sometimes. But certainly we've just completed a piece of work that shows that you can actually use vehicle to grid to mitigate the degradation in the battery. What you need to understand is a battery system will degrade simply by being there. So we have two methods of degradation. One is battery degradation through a sort of cycling. So when you are taking energy in and out of the battery, that charge throughput, that will cause battery degradation. But simply when the vehicle is parked statically doing nothing, then you will also get degradation as well. And that's an effect called calendar aging. So simply by the battery being there, open circuit, no current flowing, you will have aging in the battery. So what we were looking at was, how do we use vehicle to grid as a technology? How do we use that to condition the battery for periods when it might be, or when the vehicle might be charged and parked in a way that calendar aging is very high? And if you use the battery, and if you use the vehicle to grid technology to precondition the battery to allow it to park for longer periods of time without aging, then potentially you can extend the life of the battery, particularly a new battery. You can extend it by up to sort of 10-15%.
Well, 10-15%, I think, is it's a pretty substantial life extension, I would say.
But there is So this obviously only applies to certain use cases. So it isn't going to apply to everyone that owns a vehicle, and it isn't going to apply to everybody that chooses to try and purchase a V2G compatible charger and vehicle. But for certain operators, but particularly potentially fleet operators, so those people that control a large number of vehicles, so taxis, buses, delivery drivers, and where some of those vehicles might be parked up for extended periods of time, so over the evening, that sort of thing, then yes, there is a potential for there to be some quite significant benefits in battery life through preconditioning.
And then from the standpoint of the local energy grid, are there any benefits or support from that?
Yeah, so I mean, the same benefits in principle would be the same as if we were talking about a static battery. So we're quite used to the idea now, the concept of using static storage, containerized storage, so the sorts of things that you might see on the back of a lorry or something like that, or smaller with battery systems. They're there to support renewable energy. So when you've got intermittent sources of wind and sort of solar, and so the only difference between that and potentially V2G is that rather than having a single large battery, you're actually utilizing the individual energy capacities of the vehicle. So there's a bit more software complexity, there's a bit more network management that needs to be done. And that's why it's particularly useful potentially for operators. So for example, where I work on our university campus, we manage a fleet of electric vehicles, and we also have solar capability on our campus as well. So we've just installed vehicle to grid units, and we are using our vehicle to grid units combined with our solar panels and our vehicle to grid vehicles as a complete sort of energy ecosystem.
Which is, I think, a great example of how you can have a sustainable energy ecosystem, which is also clean in a sense, because obviously you are using a combination of solar renewable energy. You are charging, batteries, and then if there is any benefit out of unused energy in the battery, you are basically using the V2G, and then I guess the overall ecosystem is thus less climate change impactful.
Well, that's hopefully what everybody is working towards. Is there's an environmental benefit, obviously, because you're not consuming enough energy, and that obviously has implications for how that energy is sort of made. But there's also an economic advantage as well. So batteries, EVs are still relatively more expensive in terms of purchase price anyway. It's arguably whether or not they're better from a life cycle cost analysis, but the purchase price of the vehicle is undoubtedly more expensive. The main significant element of that purchase price remains the battery pack and the powertrain. So anything that you can do to either extend the life of that battery and or get more utility from that battery has to be a good thing.
It has to be a good thing. And so I think there are several practical conclusions out of the research paper, essentially on the use of batteries and the mitigant factors for the battery degradation out of the fast charging. And as you were highlighting, there are beneficial outcomes depending on how do you use V2G or V2X modes when you are not using the mobile battery, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
Am I right in summarizing?
Yes.
That's exciting, and I think it's exciting because we as consumers and as researchers and as business people, we all have to strive for more efficient technology to be used, and I think one of the key outcomes of the research is actually that if you're using even the fast charging points for the electric vehicles, you can still by adopting the other elements of the battery use, have it as if, with the relatively long life of the battery, and then if energy efficient application of it. If
so, a lot of manufacturers, battery suppliers, systems integrators are investigating how to charge the batteries better, faster, safer. They recognize it as being one of the main things that's going to drive consumer adoption. So people want to have the convenience of being able to charge their vehicles quickly. So there's a lot of innovation around both the design of the battery itself in terms of the chemistry of the battery, and also at a system level when we get battery packs in vehicles. There's a lot of innovation around software, control systems and charging technology, and that's just going to ripple through into the market over the next sort of 3, 4, 10 years.
So you reckon the innovation is going to be fast moving then, as you said, like in the 3, 4, and 10 years. 10 years is a little bit more towards the 2030, but then if we can get some progress within the next 3 to 4 years, that's pretty soon. It's almost as if it's tomorrow.
Yeah, so you can already, so in terms of, for example, vehicle to grid, currently there's only a few vehicles out on the market that you can purchase that support vehicle to grid capability. For example, the new generation of the Nissan Leaf and the ENV 200 van that's manufactured by Nissan. We know that other manufacturers are beginning to roll out their variants, their options of the technology. Other forms of transport as well, so not just cars, but other forms of transport are looking at vehicle to grid or V2X as a technology that they want to invest in. So I think we're going to see it not just in cars, we're going to see it in bikes, and we're going to see it in larger commercial vehicles soon.
Wow, that's exciting news. And I definitely learned a lot more about the battery technologies and the appropriate use of the batteries, more efficient use of the batteries. So thank you very much, Professor Marka, for finding time to talk to me today. The link to the piece we have been discussing today will be posted alongside this video. So anyone who has joined us would be able to get more details from the piece, and obviously more details are available from the WMG, the University of Warwick. If you are keen to collaborate and get in touch with your scientific ideas, so I'm pretty sure that there is a lot of collaboration and joint strive in the energy storage and the battery technologies altogether. I think we are very keen for those working in the battery industry, whether that be within academia, policy making, business, engineering, etc., to join our growing network and contribute their thinking to this conversation, which I think is vital for the finding of the sustainable energy solutions, both energy storage, energy consumption, and energy generation at some point. So if you have been watching this video and are keen to engage, please register to join the network today. And with that, Professor Marka, thank you very much. And that concludes our brief interview on the battery technologies. And good luck with your further research.
Thank you very much.